Hello everybody, welcome to Cinema Brawls. My name is Matt.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Daniel.
Here on this show we take two movies, battle them against each other to see which one is the better of the two. Today on the roster we have Jumanji and Back to the Future.
So, Jumanji is a movie about two kids who play a board game which happens to come to life and also releases another kid who is now Robin Williams. Starring Robin Williams and Kirsten Dunst, but she's a little bit younger in this. And directed by Joe Johnson. This is a 1995 version. We're not doing the new 2017 Jumanji. So,
Back to the Future, it's directed by Robert Zemeckis and stars Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. He's a high school student who gets sent to the past by the scientist Doc Brown.
Alright, so those are our two movies. Now what we're going to do is move into a segment called First Impressions, where we decide and talk about just what we think should win, should be the better movie, and why. On your mark, get set, brawl.
okay, well, I guess I'll go ahead and start. Personally, I think Jumanji is a better movie. There's a couple reasons. I watched both of these movies last night. Preparation. and I really did. I enjoyed both of the movies. But I felt more for the characters in Jumanji. I didn't connect as much with the ones in Back to the Future. I thought it was more fun, just a more fun and original idea. Jumanji is just something that you've never seen before or really since, except for in Zathura, which was just a bad knockoff.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about Zathura.
I enjoyed the storyline to it. I enjoyed the sense of humor that it brought. I hate that a lot of movies have moved into a really dumb sense of humor recently. And this one seemed good. I mean, sure, there were some dumb parts, but the sense of humor was good.
Mostly from Robin Williams.
And those monkeys. Gotta give those monkeys credit.
Fair enough.
Those monkeys were hilarious.
They didn't look very technologically advanced for the time, but
no, they didn't.
They were funny.
They were funny. I mean, when
Makes it even funnier now.
Right, when the one monkey gets into the cop car and sets off a shotgun through the roof and then just takes off, I was in tears. That's not the point. Well, that is the point. It's a good movie, and
that is the point.
And I just had more fun with it, and I felt more during watching it. And that's what's really important to me when watching a movie is how I feel about the characters and the story and the emotions that are being brought up, because that's why I watch movies.
But I personally think Back to the Future is a better movie for that exact reason. I think Back to the Future has a more well-crafted story. It's more of a straightforward comedy with some super high tension, especially towards the end. It's got great actors. The director does an amazing job. It's a really clean, really well-crafted movie, and I think that overall that just makes it a better experience, a better movie.
See, I mean, I didn't enjoy the story as much. I don't know, I just felt like there was more of a sense of adventure in Jumanji as compared to Marty McFly, who's just kind of running around in the past, not really doing much.
I will say that the stakes were a lot higher in Jumanji at any given point, just for the fact that here's a giant man-eating plant that our characters have to deal with now. Oh, the house is flooding, or the earthquake, or the stampede, or whatever. I feel like at the intense parts, the stakes are a lot higher for the characters in Jumanji, but I feel like the story, how the characters get from point A to point B, flows a little bit better in Back to the Future. Sorry.
I think Back to the Future is structured a lot.
Even if the stakes aren't very high, because I mean, realistically, Marty is just dealing with other humans and not man-eating lions.
True.
So I guess it just depends on what you feel is
but his
better
whole
in a
thing,
movie.
his whole thing was he wouldn't exist in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it does get intense, and he almost doesn't make it back to the future. Like, the car won't start when the timer goes off.
Right.
Which is kind of high stakes. And Doc is, like, hanging from the clock tower trying to plug this thing back in.
With lightning
Oh,
going
he
off.
gets it plugged in, but the other end's unplugged now because of some flying tree.
It's so
And so he's got his zip
So
line, and it's all
intense.
coming down. It is intense. It is.
All right, so I feel like we have good stance on each movie. We got Jake over here voting for Jumanji and Daniel on the side of Back to the Future. So now we're going to move on to the next segment where we deliberate over specific categories. There are 4 main categories: story, characters, its rewatchability, and the merits in genre. Basically, that means if in the future we ever get a horror movie matched up against like a cartoon or something,
Romance.
or a romance, how well does each movie fit into the genre it was made for? The 4 main categories, each category is for 10 points. All 3 of us will give a score out of 10 for each category. We'll average it together, and then at the end of all the categories, we will average everything out to one final score out of 10. That score will determine which movie is better. But let's talk more about it. The story of both movies.
So in Back to the Future, Marty McFly is the coolest guy on the planet already.
At least he thinks he is.
Well, I mean, so
I mean, you compare him to his dad, you're like, wow, that kid's cool.
that
Like,
kid's cool. He goes back, meets his parents, hijinks ensue,
Right.
basically, and then
It's a
has to
good,
make-
fun story.
Yeah, he has to make his way back to the future.
And he does. I would talk about Back to the Future story. It's a good, clean story, and like I kind of said earlier, it's the
It's
epitome.
See, I like Back to the
good word choice. Yes.
It's the epitome of time travel stories.
What I really like about Back to the Future, and probably one of the reasons why a lot of other people do as well, is because the story is so clean, so structured. I feel like it has a little bit of everything for everybody. It has the high stakes moments at the end. It has the sci-fi aspect of it all. It's kind of like a buddy cop humor style between Marty and Doc Brown.
It's also kind of like an awkward romance between
Right.
him and his mom and George.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
know.
got the thrills, it's got the humor. It's just a good family movie, and I feel like
It's a
really good story.
Great movie.
It is. It's a
Great
good story.
We've also seen it a lot, so we kind of know where they're coming
Right.
to. you know?
And like I said, it's fun. Are there better stories? Yes.
Well,
But not a lot that has lasted for so long.
It's so
And
iconic.
For the story, I would give it an 8 personally out of 10.
8 out of 10. You know, actually, I was going to be about an 8 or a 9.
I would
So-
also give it maybe an 8.
Okay.
So 8's across the board on that.
8's across
I think
the
so.
board.
Well, I think that's easy to average out. 8.
8.
Here we
So
go.
overall, story on Back to the Future gets an 8. What about Jumanji with the story?
Well, Jumanji, I mean, like I said, you go through this little boy who's being picked on. He doesn't really have a great relationship with his father. He finds a board game and he starts playing, and he just gets, I mean, to make matters worse, he gets sucked into a board game.
Always puts a damper on his day, doesn't it?
Right?
Every time it happens to me, I just think, great, here we go again.
Great. 26 years later.
Basically, this board game comes alive, and I got to give props to whoever thought of this storyline, because that's unique.
It was actually based on a book.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Don't put that in there that I didn't know that.
How many movies do you know that are talking about board games coming to life?
Right. Not
Except
a
for
lot.
Zathura, but we don't talk about Zathura.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's a totally unique concept, and they pulled it off really well. So you got these little kids, I mean, people who play board games, and generally kids are easy to relate to. And,
Sure.
I mean, the whole thing that they're trying to do the whole time is finish a board game, which is literally just rolling some dice.
Like,
but
why
they
couldn't they-
can't do it because of the things that are happening.
Right.
like
Like,
you-
a forest grows in their
Right,
house.
or the whole thing floods and there's a crocodile coming after them. And with that, I'm going to give this one another 8 because I think it is just as good as the story from Back to the Future.
You know, me too. Actually, I think
Give
they're
it
both
another 8.
Yeah.
All right. Sure.
8.
Jump on the bandwagon. 8's across the board.
8's across the
So
board.
currently the movies are both still tied at 8 on the story.
I mean, they are close movies.
Let's move on to the characters of each movie. See, something watching Jumanji just recently again, I kind of didn't like the characters a lot in Jumanji as much as I remember. And no fault of their own. I mean, you had two child actors who both did admirable for their age, I guess. But what I was kind of disappointed in was Robin Williams.
Well, here's the thing, though, because I get what you're saying. I felt
Disappointed in Robin Williams?
See, his character.
I agree, yeah. His character, the way it was written, it just didn't... Most of the time, like, for example, in Aladdin, the script had parts in it where it was basically, right out, Robin Williams improvises. And that's what he does best. He's just a total goofball. He just gets a little eccentric and jittery.
I agree with that, and he wasn't as much of a goofball in this movie, but I think that
He was very restricted, is what I mean. It didn't really seem like... It looked like Robin Williams, but it didn't act like it.
You have to remember this character is trapped in a board game for most of his life. And so he has to be a little bit distant, and he has to be a little bit off, and maybe not as, like, happy about things all the time. Which I think was... I was watching, I was like, wow, Robin Williams' character is a jerk. He's kind of a tool bag. But I'm thinking, like, well, yeah, I mean... For being in that board game, I'm surprised he's this well off in his mental stability.
That's true.
True.
And the great part about it is yes, he is a jerk for most of the movie, but he has his arc. He hugs his dad at the end. You know, he starts that relationship with Sarah, and yeah, so he is for most of the movie kind of off and not Robin Williams-y, but that's because he needs to have his arc. He needs to learn, and he
for
does.
sure.
Alright, so what were we talking about? Jumanji characters out of 10?
Yes.
I would honestly probably give it a 6 or a 7. Just because everyone else just seems like a supporting character, which I don't think they are.
And I do think that they are. I think that Alan is the main character of the whole movie. And while everyone else is a very strong supporting character, I agree that Alan had that main arc. We had our hopes and fears and everything in Alan more than anybody else.
For sure.
It's true.
He is the main character.
Right.
See, but that's what I'm saying is, I feel like they just gave everyone so much baggage. Like the cop even, he gets fired from his job. He never gets to be famous like he wanted to, like he dreamed to be. And like the kids losing their parents, and the girl
everybody
lies
does.
all the time.
She does. Everybody does have the baggage, but I do agree. I mean, they do handle it well.
I don't know.
But I would agree with you. I would give it a 7.
I'm gonna stick with 6.
Yeah, I'll stick with a 6 too then.
Characters on Back to the Future. I'd just like to say kind of right out, it's Back to the Future kind of suffers from the same problem. Like, especially, maybe even more so in Marty's case, because he's literally going to a different time. I feel like he's the only character that gets a full arc. Everyone just kind of, we just happen to look into what they were like at that point. Nothing gets resolved. We just happen to jump to a new point where everything's slightly better.
Yeah,
See, and I would argue the complete opposite. I would argue that of all the characters in the show, Marty gets the least amount of arc because he's already a full-fledged character. He as a person didn't totally change. The world around him did.
and I would actually completely agree with you on that. Marty definitely doesn't have the biggest arc. He doesn't change as much as a person. Sure, he learns, don't screw with the past. But
It's important, kids.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, think of
I know that.
with a character, you only need 3 scenes to make a complete arc, and I feel like a lot of them do get it. George for sure gets it.
Oh, for sure.
George, I mean, you can't take the future that was. You have to take the future that becomes, and the actual past that happened after Marty affected it. That's where the arcs lie.
So it's almost like the opposite of Jumanji, where in Jumanji our main character is the only one with a really full arc, whereas in Back to the Future, Marty is just kind of the same throughout, and everybody else gets a better
Absolutely, which it makes it difficult because I don't feel like I like Marty. I think he's a fun dude, but I don't connect to him as much.
That is the thing.
I
Out
mean,
of 10,
I give them a 5.
I'm gonna give him an 8.
8. I was gonna give it another 6.
So movies are still tied.
The suspense is killing me.
Which one will come out on top?
So what's the next category?
Rewatchability.
Right. I want to start with Back to the Future on this one. I think it's very rewatchable.
Oh, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah,
I would much
absolutely.
rather watch Back to the Future more than Jumanji.
And I agree with you on that. I mean, I love Jumanji, and I could rewatch it. It has rewatchability to
And
it.
we have.
Oh, yeah.
But
of
if
course.
I had to pick a movie to watch every day for a week, it would be Back to the Future over Jumanji. And I think it's just because of that fun factor. Whereas Jumanji, it is. I could if I had to sit through and watch it every week, but I would rather do so less just because it's a little more emotionally involving.
For
Yeah.
sure, it's just a little bit, for lack of a better term, heavier of a movie. I don't think that necessarily damages its
No,
rewatchability
absolutely not.
even a little bit. It's just a great one.
Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, with movies like that, you want to sit down and maybe process it a little bit longer before you go back into it.
Right. No, for sure.
Back to the Future's lasted 30 years, 33 years.
Yeah.
Jumanji's lasted 23 years. And they're both good movies that people still watch. And that's the problem with this matchup, is these are both great
Such good
movies, and they're very close.
That's why we wanted to start with this one. It's interesting.
It
For
is.
sure.
It really is.
But in terms of rewatchability, out of 10, I would give probably Back to the Future a full 9.
I'll give it an 8.
8.
I don't think it's 9 rewatchable, but I'll give it an 8.
I'm with an 8 too, actually.
And then Jumanji, I want to give a 6.
Yeah. I was gonna say 7, just because
They're
again it is
right
still fun.
They're close.
It is. It is fun.
So
I'm on 7, 6.
6.
Ooh, well,
And-
Back to the Future is pulled into the lead, but we'll see if the last category changes anything. Merits in genre. Like we said before, this is how well each movie does in its field, I guess.
Yeah.
We would classify both these movies as action adventure, one on the fantasy side and the other on the sci-fi end.
As far as their merits in genre go, I feel like they both do really well.
Mm-hmm.
But Back to the Future definitely does better.
I think overall, like, just the reception of the movies were a little bit different. I feel like Back to the Future was originally received a lot of it better. It was nominated for a bunch of awards. It actually won an Oscar.
Honestly, in its genre, I would give it a 9 because it is one of the most popular movies in its genre.
That's very true.
You know, I would give it more of an 8 just because I feel like it has aged incredibly well.
And there is one problem with its aging. Is it was totally off in the future, but that would be the
I
second
want
one.
my hoverboard.
Everybody wants a hoverboard.
But that's the second one. We're not talking about that.
I'd probably give it an 8 as well.
Jumanji, I would take down to a 7. I would say it's still aged really well. 7's still a
Still
good number.
incredibly.
I'd agree. I would give it a 7.
You know, yeah, we'll go with the 7 then.
Alright. So that gives the final scores. Back to the Future is our winner with a 7.5 out of 10. Jumanji has a 6.75 out of 10. So making Back to the Future the winner. Alright.
That is the final ruling. Voted by science.
Voted by science.
Because we're scientists, dang it.
Yeah. For next time, we're going to bring out the Cinema Bowl. So here we have about 250 different movies written on these little slips of paper. Daniel and Jake will pick out our matchup for next time. Gentlemen?
All right, we got Batman, the 1989 version, starring Michael Keaton, going up against
John Wick with Keanu Reeves.
Okay, alright.
That's gonna be a fun one.
Be good.
I'm excited.
It's gonna be good.
Good. So please tune in next time to see the brawl between those two movies.
and the frames look good. No, true.